All right, guys, this is such a privilege for me. Honestly, two of the greatest athletes ever, both Canadian, both need no introduction. Steve Nash, Wayne Gretzky. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so I know both of you are actually tennis fans. Both of you are into tennis. Just wanted to talk about, what got you into the sport initially, and just what you enjoy about the game. We can start with you, Wayne.
Well, for me, it was pretty easy. I think that I go all the way back to Wimbledon when McEnroe and Borg were playing those classic matches, either semifinals or finals. The emotion, how high it was, and more importantly, the quality of play and how competitive both guys were. And so, even if you weren't a huge tennis fan at the time, my goodness, it was so much fun to watch. There was so much skill involved. There was so much emotion that was involved, and that was easy for me. I watched those guys play, and it really gave me a reason to watch the sport. I didn't play as a child growing up a whole lot, but now I get an opportunity to play, and as you know, it's one of the great sports in the world.
Which rivalry did you prefer? If you bring up McEnroe and Borg, how about like the rivalries today? Which stand out to you?
Well, McEnroe Borg is a unique rivalry because it was more my era. So I'm probably a little bit more comfortable with that. And as you know, the athletes of today are so much better and so much more conditioned, training, the equipment. It's a different sport now, and every sport's like that. But if you can see a Roger Federer Nadal final, and Djokovic is pretty good, but there's something about Nadal and Federer playing and competing for a championship. For me, that gets my blood flowing, and I can't wait to watch it. I've been fortunate enough in my career, met a lot of great people. Stevie, George Brett was obviously an idol of mine growing up. And then Johnny Mac and I have become good friends over the years. And I think that he was a special athlete. Uh, I don't, whether you like Johnny Mac or not, he was fun to watch. But he told me a great story of the famous rant in Sweden in the tournament, and he thought he was going to get thrown out. And deep down, I think in the semifinal he was maybe trying to get thrown out because he had a 1 o'clock flight the next day, and the final was at 12 o'clock. They didn't throw him out. It's a famous rant. And he won, I think, 1-0 in the final and made his flight. So that's how good he was.
Is that the rant where he took his racket and destroyed all the bottles?
Yeah, in Sweden. I can think I can watch that over and over. Uh, yeah, he was pretty unique. And you know what? I forget about his passion and his emotion. He was very talented. And the thing that's unique about Johnny Mack is that, you know, in this era, maybe more and more kids are going through the college route, but back in the 70s, not a lot of guys did that to go into pro and become a great pro tennis player. Johnny Mack went 1 year, I believe, to Stanford. I think when he was in Stanford, he got to the quarterfinals or the semifinals at Wimbledon at a young age, which is pretty remarkable.
Steve, what got you into tennis?
I think it started out with Johnny Mac. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the personality, you couldn't take your eyes off him because you never knew what was going to happen. He wore his emotions on his sleeves. But I just think like the touch, the creativity, the feel at the net, like those things were just so beautiful. He's an artist out there in many respects. And he it was this crazy mix of like this big personality, and you never knew where his emotions were going to go. And at the same time, he it's drop volley, like
Yeah.
the deftness of touch, leaning all the way like to the line. And he was mesmerizing both with his play, his competitive fire, personality. But that's where it started. But like that's the thing, is that about tennis, so many players, and in a sense, like I never really felt like I had to choose between Agassi and Sampras. I never really felt like I had to choose between Federer and Nadal. I felt like I could really appreciate both of them, in a sense, root for both of them to reach their limit, their max, their potential, and like may the best man win. So, I think it's just amazing to see the modern game with Joker and Roger and Rafa, how they're all so different. They all get it done in different ways, but they're all, if you individually looked at their resume, you could make a case that each of them are the best player to ever play the game. You could throw Sampras in there. You could throw Johnny Max, that one great season he had, I think, or I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but he like,
Yeah. It's like 94-5. I think he won like 94 or 93 matches and lost just like a few or something like that.
exactly. So like for me, they all bring something different and exciting to the table. I think Roger started out being so mesmerizing. He's a great athlete, but he also has so much variety, beautiful strokes. He slices the backhand. He comes over top of it hard. He finds angles. The forehand is obviously mastery, but then he has the serve, the volleys, and all the variety in between. And whereas Rafa, I think when he started playing, you thought, wow, this guy's just a beast of an athlete, and he's mentally as tough as anyone we've seen
Yeah.
maybe in any sport. But as the years go by, you realize, like, I don't know if I've ever seen Rafa miss a volley. Like he's
incredible.
he's an artist too. And then you look at Djokovic, the way he moves, his flexibility, his consistency, how he like to beat him. If he's playing at his best, to beat him is almost impossible. Like he takes you, he makes you hit so many extra balls, and then he puts so much pressure on you to hit the lines. He's just in his own right as good as anyone we've ever seen. So it's just fun to see the way that three guys in this era, but going back through the years, how many guys, they find a different way to get it done, and that's what makes the sport beautiful.
So how would you compare the pressures of a team sport and an individual sport?
A team sport is one which you're going to rely on your teammates. You're going to have a belief in your teammates. And I'm sure Steve will say the same thing in basketball. You can get up in the morning and not feel 100%. You can play with the flu. You can have a cold. You can have a minor injury. You can get through it by leaning on your teammates. In an individual sport like tennis or golf, it's you. And if you're not at your best that day, you're not going to be successful. And so, although the pressures are probably the same, we can rely on teammates. And that's what a team is all about. And I've had a lot of days where I wasn't feeling great or I wasn't 100% physically, but I knew my teammates could carry me. And I think that's the advantage we had in the team sport that you guys don't have in an individual sport.
Just to be clear, Vashik, he carried the team every night.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm like listening. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Let's get 99 to cite an example of when the team carried him. It might take us. We might be here a while. I think it's hard for Wayne and I to compare in that we didn't play an individual sport, so we don't actually know what it's like to line up at Wimbledon, and to have like your career kind of like at least the next step of your career on the line, But I will say this, watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, he was a hero of mine, and I went into basketball. But before that, Wayne was my hero, and as a kid playing hockey was just, totally enamored with everything he did, and learned a lot from him by watching. Obviously the brilliance is one thing and the accomplishments, but the way he carried himself, how he was confident but humble, how he always showed up in the big moments. He let his play do the talking. And then off the court stuff, the way he handled himself in interviews. There's so many stories about Wayne about, being so gracious with the media, but also like never turn down a picture, an autograph, or a request. Like, so you talk about the human element, the humility, the humble nature, and that I learned so much from Wayne in that respect, and allowed me to be influenced by him to try to be a leader. And so my style was very much one of like supporting my teammates, being there for my teammates. Part of that is I didn't have the personality of Michael, but I definitely was influenced a lot by Wayne and trying to lead, and the pressure, being able to take that on for your teammates. You could feel that watching Wayne in the playoffs when I was a young kid, and it's a tight game in the third period, and who pops up, with the pass or the goal, and so that kind of ability to feel your team on the ropes and step up and make a play, was impactful before I could even express it in words, if you know what I mean. So different to play different sports, different to play an individual sport versus a team sport, but just learned so much from watching Wayne's career and the way he behaved on the ice, off the ice, and I'm grateful because it definitely helped me get where I wanted to go.
All right, guys, we're going to switch our focus a little bit to Bianca Andreescu, who was the first Grand Slam champion in history, singles Grand Slam champion in Canada. What are your thoughts on her rise?
Well, first of all, I go way back in women's tennis. I was very good friends with the late John Bassett, and his daughter was a pioneer, Carleen Bassett. So that's how old I am. I go way back. And she was a great Canadian player and did very well. We were lucky enough each year. We head down to Palm Springs and we go down to the tournament, and it's a great event to go to. It's not overly crowded. There's a ton of Canadians that flock down there for the event in March. I got to see her play in her very first match at Palm Springs in the year she won the U.S. Open, and we saw her first match. And I remember watching the match thinking, my gosh, that's one of the hardest working athletes I've ever seen in my life. And as the story goes, she went on to win the tournament, her first big win. She went to the US Open, and, to play in front of all those fans and everyone cheering for their American girl and one of the great athletes of all time, it was pretty special. And my hat goes off to her, how she handled herself and how she handled the pressure. Tennis Canada has done such a wonderful job. Uh, People like Steve, who are pioneers in basketball, and Mike Weir for golf in Canada, um, Carleen Bassett, now Bianca in women's tennis in Canada. Those things are all so important for the growth of our country in sports. And you got to look up to people, and you got to have heroes, because we all do. And at one point in our lives, we were all kids dreaming. Um, and the thing that impressed me most about her, and I said this to a lot of people over and over, not just how good she was and how hard she worked, but how she handled herself with the media. So many athletes that I see do interviews and on TV, in person, I just thought that she handled herself with such poise, and she was so humble. She was so appreciative. And the talk shows that she did, it's nerve wracking for a 19-year-old youngster, let alone a young female champion. So my hat goes off to her. I don't think we could have a better hero in our country for young kids. I think it's truly remarkable, and she deserves all the credit she's getting.
She also has that intangible that you're playing Serena Williams, the greatest of all time in the U.S. Open final. She wins the first set. She's on fire. To be able to handle that at 19, like as you know, like to be standing there on the line against the greatest of all time at 19 on basically our home court, fans want it more than anything. To be able to feel that momentum swing so far the other way where you're totally on top. Now, not only are you looking eye to eye with Serena, but you've lost all momentum to the greatest of all time. And for her to take a deep breath, go for winners, and not stop playing and still have that personality, like that's special.
Yeah, and it's not actually just the women's side that people are excited about in Canada, but also the men's side with Felix Auger-Aliassime, Denis Shapovalov, two young guns. What are your thoughts on those two coming up?
Well, first of all, I admire both of them, and I got to know Dennis a little bit more than Felix, but both really nice young men. As you know, you can critique tennis better than I can. Their styles are probably a little bit different, and I always say to people who watch and follow tennis a little bit, it's to me it might be an advantage to be a lefty. You don't see a lot of left-handed tennis players. Similar to that of being a left-handed pitcher, it's a different sort of beast that you have to tackle. So I love both the fact that they both play with a lot of passion and a lot of emotion. They both play for their country, and they both play hard. So I admire both of them immensely. We were lucky enough to be at the Canadian Open when Dennis had his run. We were at the Nadal match, which was so exciting. Uh, my wife kept hitting me a little bit, saying that every time you cheer for Dennis, Nadal's watching you. So I had to kind of back down a little bit, respect for the opponent. So, but it's as Steve tell you, it's so exciting to watch sports. Steve and I ran into each other in Game 6, Vancouver and Boston, and to go to a U.S. Open. I mean, to an NBA Finals basketball game, NHL Stanley Cup. It's so exciting, and that's what it's all about, and that's what we live for. And we sit around and we talk about who is the best team ever and who is the greatest players ever. Nobody has the defined answer. It's what you believe in your heart. the athletes themselves. They just got to go out there and be the best player they can be, and then be the best team you can be, and then let other people sit around and debate. Okay, who's better? Who do you think? Which team? What era? But that's what makes sports fun. Nobody has a real answer to it. We all just want to try to solve the problem.
Steve, you were an incredible, big game player, pressure player. Did you enjoy those big moments in your games?
For sure. I mean, I think early in my career, I wasn't as confident or was a little, I don't want to say scared, but you're a little bit apprehensive in those moments. But, as you start to develop and you get more responsibility and more success, it almost becomes a drug. That's what you live for is the big moments. The rest of it is the rest of it, but the game is centered around the end of the game, end of big games, playoffs, big moments. And you feel a different sensation that you live for. And so, you become this, almost like you evolve into this different person where that is your drug, you need it, you want it, and you have a different sense of calm, and almost a maniacal calm in those moments. Like
Yeah.
your every like fiber of you is like vibrating and you want it. But you're also like, so in one way, like you're in this fury, in this other way you're incredibly calm, and so it definitely became something in my career that you relished. You couldn't wait. In a sense, you never asked for a tight game, but when the game was tight and games on the line, you were grateful and thankful, and everything, your intensity, your focus raised. And so I think it was something that developed in me, and it became a drug, and it became something that I look back on as the most fun time in your career, is those stretch runs with the game on the line, whether it's in the playoffs or regular season, but typically in the playoffs where you have to step up or lose. That's what it's all about.
I agree with you 100%. When you're younger and you're first in that position and you're first going through it, we're all nervous and we're all sort of a little bit gun shy. And I don't think any athlete that I know of feels any differently. I felt the exact same way you did. But as you go along and you get more and more confidence, you start believing in yourself. That goes a long way. And then secondly, I always kind of put my mind back where I was as a kid. When you were a kid, you're always saying, here we are, game 7, Stanley Cup final. The difference was if you lost game 7 in the Stanley Cup final on a lake, you said, okay, let's play one more time. So you always try to win it back, right? Or if you're in the NBA final, all right, we lost. Okay, one more game 7. You seem to never lose, right? So I always put myself in that spot that, gosh, every kid in the world dreams of this, and this is what it's all about. So I just went to that place where I felt very comfortable and very thrilled and happy that I was part of it. And like you, when you're younger, you're a little bit more nervous and maybe a little bit more tentative. But as you get older and more mature, you start to realize, hey, this is what it's all about. And I can't wait to be in that position.
All right, guys, very last question. What was your favorite match that you've seen live or on TV?
I think for me it would be the Borg McEnroe match when John won his first Wimbledon. I just really, watching those two play, I could watch them every single day because A, they were both so great, right? But B, they were so different. One was quiet, one went around his work methodically. The other guy was, let's say, chaotic. Well, Johnny Mack and I play golf, and we all get frustrated. We all curse. No, I don't throw clubs, but the odd guy will throw a club. But even on the golf course, nobody can throw a club and curse like Johnny Mack. There's something really special about it, right? So for me, it was always watching a Borg McEnroe match. I just thought it was pretty unique.
Those memories have faded a little bit for me. I was pretty young, so the one that jumps to mind is probably almost cliche, but for a reason is Federer and Nadal at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
That went on forever, and it was dark. And was there a rain delay for a moment? And then there's the dark, and
Yeah, I think
I can't remember, but it was unbelievable tennis, unbelievable drama. Two guys who just didn't want to lose, or I should really say, two guys who really wanted to win and wouldn't let themselves lose. And it's almost like, if there ever was a draw in tennis, that was a draw. Like Bjorg and McEnroe, some of what makes the one match great is the 100 or the 50 matches before that, right? Like we're all carrying that baggage and that history of those two athletes and those two games. So it's almost like it's like 3 or 4 Stanley Cup finals on the line in one match because you've watched their kind of career unfold together.
Totally. I feel like that's one of those matches where one of those few matches where I feel like everybody kind of remembers where they were when they saw it, It's like I remember watching in my hotel room with my dad, and I was a huge Federer fan, and I was like, at the time, and I was going nuts.
What was that, the match you were going to say?
That was the match, yeah. That was the match, yeah. That was like the most memorable. And I was like I said, I was a big Federer fan, so I took it kind of hard.
I mean, there's so many great, like even some of the Connors matches back in the day. He was similar to. I mean, they were as different as possible as it could be, but also similar, him and Johnny, in that they both just wore their emotions on their sleeve and were maniacal in the way they compete. And you go through the eras, there's so many charismatic players that had incredible matches and comebacks, and yeah, it's fun. It's crazy. Do you think tennis has changed more than any other sport because of the technology?
Yeah, I think it's similar in most sports. We've gone to a little bit more of a power game now. So like in tennis, big serve goes a long way. The technology, the racket, and the coaching that we have. And basketball, I'm sure, is more of a power game. I know hockey's obviously the players are bigger and faster now. So I think all sports have gone towards a power game. And even watching women's tennis, what Serena Williams has done, it's power. And so you got to have that power. And I know Dustin, he hits the golf ball so far, and it's power. And that's where we're at in sports now. You got to be good and you got to be talented, but that power gets you to another level.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's the also just the advancement of physiotherapy and fitness and all this research, all this, like, everything is moving forward, right? So you just have the best of everything, and then obviously the actual equipment itself as well, but just everything is being pushed forward.
The knowledge we have now is so much better. I'm sure basketball is the same as hockey. We used to get a brain or a head injury. They tell you go home, take 2 aspirin, and tomorrow practice for 2 hours and sweat it out. So our knowledge, everything has come a long way.
Totally. Well, guys, I'm gonna end it there. This was by far the highlight of my quarantine. By far. Guys, thanks so much. So generous with your time, and so interesting to hear your thoughts, and it's just such an honor for me to be here talking to you guys. So thanks for joining again, guys. And
thanks, Stevie.
You got it.
Have a great day. Be safe, everyone.
All right, you too.
thanks, guys.
See you guys.